Look, I'm just going to come right out and say it. Blind dates are a scam. They're a modern form of torture disguised as putting yourself out there. But my best friend Maya was so insistent about this guy that I finally caved. Sarah, he's perfect for you, she'd said, clutching my shoulders with the intensity of someone who'd just discovered the meaning of life. He's successful, charming, and he owns his own company. So does the guy who runs the hot dog cart on Fifth Avenue, I'd replied.
Sarah, he's a CEO
of a tech company, and he's hot. Like, ridiculously hot. That's how I found myself standing outside Lumiere, one of those restaurants where they serve you 3 molecules of food on a plate the size of a manhole cover and charge you the equivalent of a car payment. I was wearing my fancy dress, the one I'd bought for my cousin's wedding and had worn exactly twice, and heels that were already making me regret every life choice that had led to this moment. My phone buzzed. Maya again. Remember, be yourself. But like, the fun version of yourself. And don't talk about your cat for more than 5 minutes. Max. I typed back. You're a terrible friend. Love you too. Now get in there and bag that CEO. I walked into Lumiere and immediately felt underdressed, despite my fancy dress. Everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine spread titled People Who Definitely Know Which Fork to Use. The hostess, a woman with cheekbones that could cut glass, smiled at me with the kind of polite concern usually reserved for lost children. Reservation, she asked.
Yes.
Actually, I'm meeting someone. Parker something? I realized Maya had never actually told me his last name.
He's a CEO?
She somehow made, yes, sound like she was both impressed and pitying me at the same time. Mr. Hamilton. Right this way. My stomach did a little flip. Hamilton. That sounded important. Maya was going to be insufferable if this went well. The hostess led me through the restaurant, past tables of people having conversations that probably involved words like market disruption and quarterly projections. And then I saw him. Okay.
Fine.
Maya was right about the hot part. Parker Hamilton looked like someone had asked an AI to generate handsome CEO, and it had actually nailed it. Dark hair, sharp jawline, expensive suit that probably cost more than my car. He was looking at his phone with the kind of intense concentration usually reserved for defusing bombs. Mr. Hamilton, your guest has arrived, the hostess announced. He looked up, and I swear to God, his smile could have powered a small city. Sarah, great to meet you. He stood up and extended his hand. I shook it, trying to ignore how my palm was already getting sweaty. Nice to meet you too. Thanks for, agreeing to this. We sat down, and immediately a waiter appeared as if summoned by some secret rich people's signal I didn't know about. Something to drink?
Parker asked.
Just water's fine, I said. Nonsense. We're celebrating. We are. Meeting new people is always worth celebrating. 2 glasses of the Domaine Laflave, please. The waiter nodded and disappeared. I had absolutely no idea what Parker had just ordered, but I was pretty sure it was expensive based on how the waiter's eyes had lit up. So, Parker said, leaning back with the confidence of someone who'd never experienced an awkward moment in his life, Maya tells me you're in marketing? Yeah, well, sort of. I work at a marketing agency. Junior account manager. I tried to sound more impressive than I felt. What about you? Maya mentioned you run a tech company. I do. We're in the AI space. Specifically, we're developing machine learning algorithms for predictive analytics in the healthcare sector. I blinked. That's a lot of words.
He laughed. Sorry.
Basically, we help hospitals predict patient outcomes using artificial intelligence.
Oh.
That's actually really cool. It is, isn't it? I love what I do. There's something incredible about being at the intersection of technology and... His phone buzzed loudly on the table. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted slightly. Sorry, do you mind if I just quickly check this? We're in the middle of a funding round, and... No, totally fine. He picked up his phone, and his face went through approximately 17 different emotions in 3 seconds. Oh no. Everything okay? He looked at me, then back at his phone. Okay, this is going to sound completely insane, but there's a situation at the office. A major situation. Like, potentially company-ending situation. Oh my God. My CTO just locked himself in the server room and won't come out. I waited for him to say he was kidding. He didn't. I'm sorry, what? Jake, that's our chief technology officer. He's having some kind of breakdown. He thinks our lead developer is trying to sabotage the code for our big presentation tomorrow. Parker ran his hand through his hair. This is a disaster.
I'm so sorry, Sarah.
This is literally the worst timing. The wine arrived. The waiter poured it with flourish while Parker's phone continued to buzz like an angry hornet. Listen, I said, surprising myself. If you need to go handle that, I completely understand.
No.
I can't just leave you here. That would be incredibly rude. His phone buzzed again. Although, oh God, now Jake is threatening to delete everything if someone doesn't bring him proof that Marcus isn't a corporate spy. I took a sip of the wine. It was delicious, which somehow made the situation funnier. Is Marcus a corporate spy?
No.
He's just socially awkward and happens to have worked for 3 of our competitors. Parker saw my expression. That'll sound bad when I say it out loud. Another buzz. Parker looked at his phone and actually groaned. Now Marcus is outside the server room defending himself, and I guess they're having a shouting match through the door? My VP of operations says it's getting hostile. I couldn't help it. I started laughing. I'm sorry, I know this is serious for you, but this is like a sitcom. To his credit, Parker started laughing too. You're right. This is absolutely ridiculous. He looked at me apologetically. Sarah, I have to go deal with this. I feel terrible, but...
Go.
Seriously. Go prevent your CTO from deleting your entire company. You're amazing for understanding. He stood up, then paused.
Wait.
Would you want to come with me? I'm sorry, what? I know this is bizarre, but it might actually help. Jake is super paranoid right now, and if I show up with someone who's clearly not involved in tech drama, it might help defuse the situation. Sometimes he just needs to see a neutral face to calm down. I looked at my wine, at the fancy restaurant, at this absurdly handsome man asking me to help him stage an intervention with his barricaded CTO. This is the weirdest date I've ever been on, I said. Is that a yes? I downed the rest of my expensive wine in one gulp. Let's go save your company. 15 minutes later, I was in Parker's Tesla because, of course, he drove a Tesla, speeding toward his office in downtown Manhattan. He was on the phone with his VP of operations, trying to get updates on the Jake situation. Okay. Don't let him touch any servers.
Just keep talking to him.
Tell him I'm bringing a mediator. He hung up and glanced at me. Sorry, you're now officially a mediator. I don't even know what a server is. That might actually work in our favor. We pulled up to a sleek glass building that screamed tech money. Parker parked illegally right in front, and we rushed inside. The security guard looked up, saw Parker's face, and just waved us through with a weary expression that suggested this was not the first emergency of the week. The elevator ride to the 12th floor was awkward in that special way where you're with someone you met 45 minutes ago, and you're now rushing to help them deal with a workplace hostage situation. So, I said, because silence felt worse, does Jake do this often? Define often. Parker. This is the 3rd time this year. He saw my expression. Look, he's a genius, okay? Literal genius. He built our entire infrastructure from scratch. But he's also high-strung. High-strung is doing the Sunday Times crossword in pen. This is something else. The elevator doors opened to chaos. The office was one of those open-concept tech spaces with beanbag chairs, standing desks, and motivational posters about disrupting the status quo. Right now, about 20 people were clustered around a door-marked server room, and I could hear muffled shouting from inside. A tall man with glasses who looked like he'd been crying was standing closest to the door. Jake, please. I'm not a spy. I just have an unfortunate employment history. That's what a spy would say, came a voice from inside. Parker pushed through the crowd. Everyone turned to look at him with expressions of desperate relief, like he was a lifeguard arriving at a beach with a shark problem. Okay, everyone step back. Give him space. Parker approached the door. Jake? It's me. Can we talk? Did you bring proof that Marcus isn't trying to steal our code? I brought something better. I brought an impartial third party. There was a pause. What? Parker gestured for me to come forward. I shuffled toward the door, feeling extremely aware that I was still in my fancy dress and uncomfortable heels, surrounded by people in hoodies and jeans. Jake, this is Sarah. She's a marketing professional who knows nothing about coding and has no vested interest in our company. She's going to help us figure this out. Another pause. Is this a trick? No trick. She doesn't even know what a server is. Hey, I protested quietly. The door opened a crack, and I saw one wild eye peering out. You really don't know anything about code? I can barely work my TV remote, I said honestly. The door opened wider. Jake was a thin man in his 30s with hair that looked like he'd been pulling at it for several hours. His t-shirt said, "There's no place like 12701," which meant nothing to me. Okay, Jake said. Okay, Sarah. Impartial third party. Look at Marcus and tell me, does he look like a corporate spy? I turned to Marcus, who was anxiously fidgeting with his glasses. He looked like a guy who owned multiple vintage Star Trek collectibles and had strong opinions about which Linux distribution was superior. I said carefully. He looks like a guy who's very passionate about computers. See, Marcus said. That's all I am. But you worked for Innovatech, DataStream, and TechCore. Jake countered. Because I'm good at my job. Companies hire me. Parker put his hand on Jake's shoulder. Jake, buddy, we've been through this. We did a complete background check before we hired Marcus. He's clean. Background checks can be faked. I decided to try something. Jake, can I ask you something? He looked at me suspiciously. What? What exactly would Marcus gain from sabotaging your code? Like, walk me through it. I genuinely don't understand how corporate espionage works in tech. Jake opened his mouth, then closed it. Then opened it again. Well, someone would pay him to.
Who? And why?
And wouldn't it be obvious if your code suddenly showed up at another company? Jake's eyes started twitching. I mean, there are ways to. And I continued on a roll now. If Marcus was actually a spy, wouldn't he be trying to not draw attention to himself? Instead of, having a loud argument outside the server room with everyone watching. Marcus's face lit up. Yes. Exactly. Thank you, Sarah. Jake looked between me, Marcus, and Parker. His shoulders slowly slumped. I haven't slept in 3 days. Jake, Parker said gently, we got the presentation tomorrow. You're exhausted. You need to sleep. But what if? I'll stay here tonight, Parker said. I'll personally guard the servers. Sarah will witness that I'm here. She's impartial, remember? Jake looked at me. You do that. I looked at Parker, who was giving me the most hopeful expression I'd ever seen on an adult man. Sure, I said, wondering what my life had become. Why not? 20 minutes later, Jake had been loaded into an Uber with strict instructions to sleep for at least 8 hours. Marcus had returned to his desk, vindicated. The crowd had dispersed. And I was sitting in a beanbag chair in Parker's office, watching him order pizza on his phone. I am so sorry, he said for approximately the 15th time. This is not how this evening was supposed to go. How was it supposed to go? Well, we were going to have a nice dinner, talk about our interests, maybe discover we both love Italian cinema, or hiking, or something equally date-appropriate. Page 10. Do you love Italian cinema or hiking? I've never seen an Italian film in my life, and I think hiking is just walking but with more bugs. I laughed. Well, at least you're honest. The pizza arrived, apparently even at 10 p.m. You can get fancy pizza delivered to a tech company in Manhattan, and we sat there in his office, eating pepperoni slices and talking. Really talking. Turned out, Parker had started his company 5 years ago in his apartment with 2 friends from college. He worked 100-hour weeks, almost went bankrupt twice, and once had to choose between paying his employees and paying his rent. He chose employees and slept in the office for 3 months. Jake had been with him since the beginning, which is why he tolerated the occasional paranoid breakdown. He's like family, Parker said. Stressful, anxiety-inducing family, but family. I told him about my own work disasters, like the time I accidentally sent a client presentation with placeholder text that said, "Insert impressive statistics here," and had to pretend it was a bold new marketing strategy called radical transparency. Did it work? He asked. They signed for another year. We talked until 2 a.m. At some point, I took off my terrible heels, and he loosened his tie. The conversation flowed from work to family to that weird thing where you're both comfortable enough to share embarrassing stories, but still trying to impress each other a little bit. So, Parker said finally, this was officially the worst first date in history. Oh, absolutely. Catastrophically bad. Would you want to try for a second one? Maybe a location that doesn't involve any potential corporate sabotage. I pretended to think about it. I don't know. This set a pretty high bar for entertainment value. I could fake another company crisis, if that would help. Parker. Sarah. I smiled.
Yeah.
I'd like that. He smiled back, and somehow in his fancy office with empty pizza boxes and both of us exhausted at 2 a.m., it felt more real than any perfect dinner at Lumiere could have been. My phone buzzed. Maya. How did it go? Details. I typed back. You're not going to believe this story. And honestly, I barely believed it myself. But as Parker walked me down to get me a cab, still apologizing and already suggesting restaurant options for our actual proper date, I realized something. The best stories come from the moments when everything goes completely off the rails. Sometimes disaster is just romance in disguise.